My name is Tyler J. Markwart. I am the Executive Director at Allele Seeds Research. I am also the Director of Branding and Product Development at Vuber Vaporizers, and I also write for 3 different medical marijuana magazines, Culture, The Northwest Leaf, and also Ladybud Magazine, which is based out of Denver, Colorado. I have a large background in plant science. I studied at WSU, Washington State University, in the organic agriculture program. I also worked in the molecular plant science department, so I know about GMOs and I also know about organic agriculture. I have a wide knowledge of both. I have won multiple awards for my research, and I've also received many grants from the government to do research on organic agriculture and genetically modified organisms. So I'm gonna nerd out on you guys a little bit here, and we're gonna talk about some plant science. First things first. What is the one thing you hear when people talk about marijuana? What strain do you have? What strain are you smoking? What's a strain? A strain is a term that has been derived by the cannabis community since the 1970s. It really doesn't mean anything outside of it. In all the other agriculture communities, we talk about cultivars or cultivated varieties. But in the cannabis industry, we kind of like to do things our own way, so we give it its own name, and it is strain. Under the strain, we have the general title of Cannabis sativa. That kind of gives like a generalization of all the plants that fall within that category. Under that, it kind of breaks down into subcategories where you have Cannabis indica, Cannabis sativa, Cannabis ruderalis, Cannabis africana, Cannabis chinensis, Cannabis australis. You can pretty much go around everywhere and locate landrace genetics. And those are associated with the different types of environments that these plants grow in. And they're associated to the titles in which they're given under the sublines. So when we break those down, the plant structure and the genetic expression is really what we're talking about. When you're looking at indicas, you're looking at a shorter, bushier plant that's generally grown in the higher altitudes in the mountains. So it has these certain characteristics. Sativas are on the opposite end. They tend to grow in tropical regions where they're a little bit taller, a little bit more airy, or they have internode spacing that's a little bit taller. So what's the interesting part? Well, you can take a plant that's grown at 5,000 feet above sea level, and you can bring it down to sea level. And that plant will change its characteristics or its phenotype depending on the environment it's in. Now, its genotype, the actual genetic makeup, won't really change, just the expression levels at which they express the characteristics. So that's the number one thing that we have to remember is genotype and phenotype. Phenotypes are what you're looking for in specific characteristics, since your terpenes, your flavonoids, the way the plant looks in a certain growing environment. And when we do breeding, we need to look more into genotypes to start making sure that we know exactly what we're doing and what we're crossing comes out the way we want it to in the end. What is cannabis? Cannabis is a very, very, very special plant. It's part of a very small community of plants. Less than 7% of plants in the world are, so plants fall under 2 categories, monoecious and dioecious. Monoecious meaning all of the sexual organs of the plant are on one plant, and dioecious means it has sexual separation, male and female, like humans do. At being a small percentage of plants in the world that have that, less than 7%, cannabis is very unique. But it also has another unique property. It can hermaphrodite, and it can create its own seeds within its own realm. And so when we look at this plant, we see it's generally considered what's a photosensitive plant, meaning it has to have a minimum of 12 hours of darkness in order to initiate flowering. And so you can basically keep a plant in its vegetative state, which you see here over on the screen, where it has no buds. It's just constantly producing leaves and stems and growing and growing and growing. Once you change into that time period where you have 12 hours or more of darkness, the plant's going to start triggering certain hormones and genetics where it's going to start producing flower. So what is the alternative to this? How can we make our plants not grow the way we want to? We have a certain strain called autoflowering strains, or ruderalis. So after a certain internode distance, which is the distance between where one stem comes out and another stem comes out, the plant will get to a certain internode height, and its genetics will kick in automatically. So you don't have to change the flowering times, or you don't have to change the period in which it grows in. It will automatically flower under any certain photo period, which is very, very beneficial, because that means you can do bumper crops. You can grow a crop start your crop in April, harvest in July, when normally, we're talking about outdoors, when normally your crop would take to at least October, November, September sometime to finish then. So you get yourself a bumper crop and a couple other things. Now, the profile of the cannabinoids in that plant are completely different due to its location, where it's coming from, and how it's bred. When we're looking at ruderalis, we're looking at a little bit of a higher CBD strain and a lot less flavor. So the variations are depending, again, on what you're looking for and what you're looking your end product to do. So how does this all affect humans? Well, humans have what's called an endocannabinoid system, and this directly interacts with all the cannabinoids that we consume. Women actually have a little bit better advantage over men because they have more cannabinoid receptors than we do. So this goes both ways. Women can either consume a small amount of cannabis and get a large amount of medicinal value for it, or they can be wired in the fact that they can go the other way. They can consume a larger amount and not receive as much medical benefit from it. So the realm in which the science is going to play a part in this in the next 10 years is not only going to be with the plant, but the plant's interaction with people and how that works on an individual basis. Many of the people here have been talking about tailoring cannabinoid strains specifically for patients, and this is where it's going to come hand in hand, is working between the breeders, the distributors, and the patients, so that the information that they get is all corroborated properly and brought in and used so that we can advance what we're doing in not just a guessing manner of, oh, this one looks great, or oh, this one looks bad, but we can actually go in and take leaf samples, do genetic runs, make a look at everything what's up, making that plant up, and make a decision on whether we want to breed with this plant or if we want to pass that plant on. So stepping into the next realm of things, everybody has been smoking cannabis for thousands of years using a variety of different things, from just throwing cannabis on top of hot heated stones to the new age technology of vaporizers, which is what my company involves themselves in, and handheld cigarettes. So what we're looking now is these are all involved with what's called a concentrate. So you're taking a large amount of cannabis and concentrating it into a very small amount. That can be done in many different ways. You can either do it using water, you can use it using a solvent, which water is also a solvent, but it is a very low, has low solubility with cannabis. So we have water, we have solvents, chemical solvents like butane, propane, and hexane, and we also have inert gases like nitrogen and CO2. Each one of these processes yields a different product, meaning if you were to start with the same exact starting product, let's say 3 pounds, and you had these 3 different situations, solvent, solventless, and then also inert gas, you would end up with 3 different products at the end because they're all different processes. So when we look at that, we have to say, all right, again, where are we directing, who's using this, and how are we doing it? Pieces of equipment like this, which don't have a button, don't require a lot of use or individual personal use and maintenance, patients can just stick it in their mouth, inhale, and instantly given their medicine. This is beneficial for people with MS, ALS, who have inabilities to light a pipe, hold a pipe, and do everything else that they need to do. This will help out many people all over the world. And it's just one of the many technologies that's out there. One of the things that we've seen in the few years has been dab rigs, modifying the marijuana pipe or the bong to actually use specifically for concentrates. When the concentrate is far more effective for some people, because if you have to smoke an ounce of marijuana a day, consuming that much smoke in your lungs is going to be irritating and just overall time consuming. With the concentrates, we can get to our needed end result much quicker and much safer by consuming far less carcinogenic material, and because we're not burning anything. We're actually vaporizing. We're going from a solid to a gas. We're sublimating. And so you're not getting into the side combustion or anything involved in that. So in the dabbing, what we call dabbing, there's a whole realm of things. We have tools, we have silicone containers to keep your dabs in so they don't get destroyed. Nails, you have a domeless nail, a domed nail, titanium, quartz, ceramic. So the options out there are endless for whatever you want to do. And at some point, it's pretty ridiculous. You're looking at like $2,000 glass pieces. You're like, that's worth more than my car. I can't buy that. So, you know, there's just a lot of things out there. And again, this comes down to personal preference. Some people might find that dabbing is way too much for them. Some people might find that that's exactly what they need. So again, personal preference. extraction methods of CO2 and butane. With a solvent, you're looking at a closed loop versus open blasting. Open blasting is taking a tube, putting a filter at the end of it, packing that tube with cannabis, and then blowing a can of butane through it into a container, like a glass dish, and then processing it beyond that. It has its advantages. It's cheap, it's simple, it can be done in your backyard. It has its disadvantages. It's highly explosive. It can send you over your neighbor's whole entire house if you blow your house up. So there's a lot of information that needs to be worked with and used properly when you're doing these kind of things, because they are extremely dangerous. So we see a lot of things where patients are saying, okay, well, we're not really interested in consuming butane if it's not purged properly. If you have residual butane in, or residual hexane or propane or ethanol left in your sample, if somebody has a compromised immune system, that's not beneficial for them. It's going to cause more problems than it is going to be beneficial. So setting industry standards, getting into the areas of making sure that we know exactly what is in our product is essential to making sure that patients get the best treatment they can. So some patients choose to use solventless, bubble hash, dry sift, inert gases, and using pressure. Are all these wonderful methods to extract cannabinoids from the plant, but again, leaving you with a different end result. CO2 oil is very popular for these pens to be used in because it's a little bit more viscous. It can flow a little bit easier through the pen, as BHO is inoperable in these kind of pens. Again, your end result is what you're looking for. The product in which you're going to deliver it is something else that needs to be incorporated into your system. CO2 machines roughly range from $50,000 to $100,000. If you're going to make that a kind of investment into equipment, you want to make sure you know how to use it properly. You want to make sure that the end result is going to become what you're actually looking to sell. Generally on a CO2 machine, you're getting less harvest because it's not a solvent. You're pushing an inert gas past it, and you're just kind of pushing everything through. You're going to get more harvest from butane and solvents, but you're probably going to get a lot more flavor out of other things, like combining certain methods, like using butane and propane, a small blend between the two. Each one has its own solubility for certain things, so you can bring in different components, blending the two together. A wide variety of things can happen. But the important thing is purging. Purging is the #1 thing that you need to remember if you're going to be involved in processing. Getting an oven, getting a proper purging tank where you can get the pressures up to about 26 to 28 pounds per square inch, and push all the gases out of your sample. So it takes a lot of work to get a quality medical grade concentrate on the market. This isn't something that you can just go and blow in your backyard and be like, hey, I did it. It takes years of experience, chemistry degrees, and a lot of knowledge to make sure you don't blow up your entire factory. Water content's another thing. So if you have water in your sample, you're going to end up with a sizzle when you dab, and it's going to be slightly confusing of whether you're sizzling water or if there's a residual butane in there. MSDS, does anybody know what MSDS is? Probably one of the most important things in our industry is material safety data sheets. This will tell you what products are made up of, what is going into them, and what the dangers are with them. So when we talk about butane, we know what the dangers of butane are. Normal people who do not have any immune-compromised systems can handle up to 10,000 parts per million of butane per day, or in a general sitting. That's a lot of butane. Now, is that good? No, that's not good at all. That's obviously not going to be beneficial for anybody. But what we're saying is we're setting standards, and we know where we can go, how far, and what can be done with that. When we're looking at things, there's new companies coming out all the time. This new company has come out, and they have a product. It's called MZ16X. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not. This product is designed, it's a degreaser, it's a commercial degreaser. So it's designed to remove grease, dirt, and all other products from car products. It's also used as a refrigerant. So this product is not designed, it is not marketed for processing cannabinoids. It's designed and marketed to remove dirt and oil. The MSDS sheet on that does not have any information on how detrimental it is to human health when consumed. This is a problem. People are blasting their BHO with this product, and we don't know what it's doing, which means if there's residual ppm in there, this is not a good thing. Very, very important to do your research. It's very, very important to be knowledgeable, and it's very, very important to make sure you set standards for yourself so you don't get yourself in trouble later down the road because of your ignorance. This is one of my favorite things, new technologies that's out available on the market. LED lights have been used in agriculture for the last 20 years. I worked in the molecular plant science at WSU. We do a lot of red, blue light technology testing to make sure to see how plants react to different light spectrums. And the technology is growing in leaps and bounds. This technology will allow you to reduce the amount of input you're putting into your garden. It takes out the amount of AC. It takes out all the equipment that's involved with heating and ventilation. It takes out all the problems associated with having a 110-degree room in the middle of July. There are endless benefits to this. Now, that's not without saying there aren't negatives. Since the technology is a little bit new on the commercial level, there is kind of a, let's say, not a very good standardization across the board. So you can pay for a product and they may advertise it works great, but it doesn't. It only has a penetration of like a foot or two, and it just doesn't do what you want it to do. You want big bushy plants. You want to be able to like benefit from your harvest so that you can pay your bills and you can do everything you want to do. You can't do that if you're spending money and your input is larger than your output. Technology is going to help us with that. And this technology, I feel, in the next 10 years is going to be a game changer. It already is, in my opinion. So we already discussed monoecious versus dioecious, and now we're going to step into a little bit something like this. Some of you are going to think I'm crazy, because I'm going to tell you this, and this is the number one most important thing that you need to remember if you are going to get into growing cannabis. Plants are just like people, exactly like them. They talk. Plants will talk to you. You just have to know how to talk to them. You have to be able to know how to read them. You have to be able to know, why are they crying? Why is my plant laying halfway on its side? What is the cause of this? Speak to me, tell me. And you can do that by educating yourselves with plant science, reading books, going in there, talking to people, going on the internet. But make sure that you use your intuition to know, hey, maybe this is a little shifty, and why can I only find information on organizational websites that aren't really supported by science, or there's no scientific journals written on this? PubMed, P-U-B-M-E-D, PubMed.org is our government's website that publishes scientific studies that are published in respected journals. You can type cannabis in there, and you will get over 20,000 different articles. Go to the World Patent legislation. I can't remember exactly what it is, but if you go there and you type cannabis in, there are over 9,000 patents implemented in the world on cannabis and cannabis technologies. So this is moving very, very quickly, and the good thing is you're already ahead of everybody else in the curve, because you realize where you are and what the future is about to hold for us. So plants are like people. How are they like people? We enjoy the same similar conditions. When you say it's too hot, or it's probably going to be too hot for the plant. When you think it's too cold, it's the same thing. So think of it as if you're going to think of yourself. If you walk into your grow room and you're under the lights and you say, man, everything's kind of comfortable in here and it looks good, it feels good, I got air moving around with a cool breeze, everything's gone, set your standards to how you would like the room to be. And then your plants will adapt to that, because they're your plants. They will actually interact with you, and you will see them respond to you differently than they respond to other people when they garden. If somebody else takes your garden over, for instance, like when I'm here for the week, I can't garden my own garden, so I have to send somebody out there to take care of it for me. When I come back, I have a lot of catch-up work to do to make sure that I don't lose everything in that manner. So it's super important to get a really good knowledge of your plant. So we talked about sativas, indicas, ruderalis, chinesis. Well, each plant has its own specific liking, like we all do. Some of us, I live in Seattle, where it's cool, 70, never gets below 32 really, never gets above 90, but that's my personal thing. I come to Florida and I lose like 10 pounds just sweating getting out here. So, but that's my personal thing. So many people love this hot weather and many people hate the cold weather. Again, you need to learn your plant. If you're trying to grow 15 different strains and you're not really knowledgeable on any one of those strains, you're not going to get the end result you really want. Narrow it down, start smaller, work on and focus and learn your plant, understand that strain so that you can make that strain the most beneficial. Yeah, it's great to have 30, 40 different strains on hand and like smoke something different every single day. But if you're not producing the best medicine for yourself and other people, then there's no point in doing it. I mean, it's just, in my opinion, pointless. And so, yeah, so plants and people are both extremely sensitive to rapid environmental changes. We talked about pH earlier and air control and airflow. Well, if in hydroponics, if you leave your pH untested or if it fluctuates at all, within hours or minutes, you're gonna see changes and very detrimental changes happening. Soil gives you slightly a bit buffer to work with, so you can kind of screw up a little bit, but still end up with something, and it helps you kind of move along a little bit better. But again, watch your environmental changes. Anything extremely drastic is going to cause a major drastic turn in your production. So how do plants talk to each other? Because they interact with each other and they have chemical signaling that causes certain things to happen. So in this picture over here, we can see that this garden has a lot of different plants in it. Well, you can see that the main stalks are stepping up above the rest of the canopy, and this is caused because of overcrowding. We're watching individual plants touch each other. Well, since they're different strains, they have different chemical makeup, and they send different chemical signals to each other that cause shade resistance and other things like that, where the plant will say, hey, I'm getting shaded, I should probably boost my height a little bit to try to get a little bit over this guy here, and that stretches your plant out, and then you don't end up with a nice compact looking bud. You end up with tiny little golf balls all over the place, which has its benefit. Its bag appeal isn't as nice, but it makes it a little bit easier to do bagging out smaller weights and stuff like that instead of cutting up a huge nug and you get half a nug in your bag. Again, these are just marketing things that marketing has to kind of work with production. Production has to work with everybody who's bringing stuff in. And it's when you work in your business, you all have to integrate together to make sure that the end product is going to the proper place in the proper manner it should. So leaf health is the #1 thing when we're looking at plants. You can see yellowing, you can see redding in the red veins in the leaves, you can see burnt tips at the end. There's lots of variety of things that happen. And once you understand, oh, the burnt tip is because I'm adding too many nutrients. Oh, we're getting yellowing because we have less nitrogen. So when you start understanding, oh, the leaves are curling because I'm not watering enough, and that's trying to hold transpiration in, the better you understand the science behind the plant, the better you will be able to grow it. It really comes down to just educating yourself as much as you possibly can. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is probably going to be, oh, so this is super important. I started to miss this. This picture here is probably one of my favorite photos, and the fact that it's extremely important to manage your airflow, not just above the canopy, but below the canopy. If you don't manage your airflow below the canopy, it's going to increase the amount of mold and mildew. Oh. And within time, you're going to end up with these little white spots starting to grow. Maybe you won't pick it up on day one because it's in a plant that's under the bottom. But in a little bit, it's going to start bringing in a whole load of other problems. These are spider mites. This is the worst enemy that you have in your garden. This is the worst enemy that you have in your garden. This will destroy everything, and it is not easy to get rid of at all. Oh, I messed up. I went too far. So look at me and not up there. Oh, thank you. Science, technology. So one of the things we're going to talk about is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable is molecular plant science. That's GMOs. Okay, so don't throw anything at me. I'm just explaining things to you. We already have GMO cannabis. If you purchase feminized seeds, there's a large possibility you're getting genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms fall into a large category. Some of them are called transgenics, which means we're taking genetic code from one organism and placing it into a separate organism. This has lots of detrimental problems. This has lots of beneficial things to it. When we're looking at GMO seeds, for feminized seeds for marijuana, there's multiple ways of getting them. An organic way of getting feminized seeds is what's called excessive dumping, taking the male pollen in large amounts and covering the female plant in it. This promotes a large amount of female seeds to be produced. You're still going to get some male seeds out of it, but the extraordinary amount of it will increase to female seeds. This is one of the most organic methods that you can use. There's other ways of doing it, causing light deprivation, hacking the soil, and causing massive stress to the plant. But these aren't beneficial things that are going to help your plant. I mean, it's like you. If I punch you in the face, yeah, it's going to like maybe knock your tooth out, but that's causing you pain right now, but it's not going to feel good. Just go to a doctor and get it done properly, you know? So when we look at other things in the realm of genetically modifying seeds, we look at silver thiosulfate, which is a chemical that's applied in order to change the genetic makeup and expression of the plant. One of the interesting things that we've seen now is called the process called double haploidy. Double haploidy is something that is really, really, really interesting. What it does is it makes exact copies of female plants. You basically take the genome, you double it on one side, and you end up with an exact replica of the plant that you had before, and it can be done in 6 generations, 1 generation. When we breed for stabilization. We don't breed for 500 different phenotypes. We try to make sure that when we get seeds, we plant it in the ground, every single one of those looks exactly the same and responds to the environment that we're growing it in. Double haploidy can get us to that process very, very quickly. To standardize a strain and make it stable, it takes 6 generations of breeding and backbreeding to the original parents to get it stable. And that's if you can stabilize the genetics. Sometimes it can take even longer. When we're looking at this double haploidy process, we can get to the same result in 1 generation and save a lot of time and money in breeding. And this is, again, this is a biotechnology process that's emerging in the last 10, 15 years that's making major impacts in agriculture in a beneficial way. With gene expression, we're looking at a lot of different things. So we all have like computer codes inside us that basically tell us how to operate in our environment. So when you're given a certain environmental condition, your body will respond to that, and that's due to the expression levels your genes put out. So a certain gene can express a certain trait. Let's, for instance, say your plants smell like lemons. Well, that's a certain genetic trait that's expressed. We can select for those traits by introducing markers, genetic markers, and going in and marking certain things where we say, hey, this genotype and this phenotype bring us this certain characteristic. Let's note that so that when other plant scientists go in to do their breeding processes, it makes it far easier. They can say, hey, let's take a tissue culture sample from your plant. Let's run our genetics through it, see how it operates, get our list out, what everything is, and then let's analyze that and say, okay, this is what we like and this is what we don't like. This plant's going to be good for breeding. This plant's not going to be good for breeding. The laboratories are already doing this. Arabidopsis thaliana was a plant I worked on for about 3 years. It's the #1 research plant in the world. It was the first plant to have its entire genome completely sequenced. We have been extremely lucky to have CannaBiz have its genome entirely sequenced. This is going to save us time and money. So when we look at these genes, we can take them, we can overexpress them, or we can nullify them. We can make them not pop out. And this can all be done through plant science. Again, this is something that a lot of people worry about. A lot of people are worried about Monsanto marijuana coming in and taking everything over. People are very worried about Roundup being introduced into their things. And these are serious things that we need to consider. But we cannot throw out the entire biotechnology package because one company in the world is being used as a negative impact on the thing. There are far, far more beneficial things that we can get out of biotechnology than what is being said in the media right now. We just need to approach it in a scientific way, and we need to understand how we can operate and how we can use those things. If we can tailor cannabis plants to grow in arid regions, if we can tailor them to grow in high wet regions, these are things that biotechnologies can help us do in a very quick manner. Not saying that organic agriculture is not good. I majored in it in college. I think it's the best system to use. But I also acknowledge that sometimes in certain areas, we need to have tools in our pockets to benefit ourselves as agriculture producers. If we cannot have tools to help us produce what we need, we cannot survive. You cannot make a living as a farmer if you don't have a harvest. If your entire harvest is ruined, you're done. Everything is done. You have nothing. One of the most interesting things that I spoke to Steve about yesterday was our industry is illegal, more or less. This means we don't have subsidies. We don't have tax write-offs. We don't have the help that everybody else has. But yet we're the one industry that's emerging out of every other agriculture industry out there. We're becoming the largest agricultural sector there is, but we're not getting any help from anyone. So to me, it seems, I know Donnie kind of got on this earlier and talked about the government, but we do need to get the government out of what we're doing and let ourselves regulate this. When I speak to my senators and I speak to my representatives, they don't care. They do not care about marijuana because they don't know. You have to know about something to care about it. And that's what it is. I care about science, so I educate myself on it. Still, to this day, I educate, I read myself. I go on and read the most interesting things that are put out, and even the most uninteresting things. Because even if it doesn't make any sense to you, maybe you can pull one or two pieces of information out of there that will help you. And that is extremely beneficial. But the biggest problem we face in science is ignorance. It's just people don't understand the complexities that are happening. The unbelievable amount of chemistry is interacting on a day-to-day basis in these plants is a very difficult thing to understand. So these scientists who put years of time and effort and money, a lot of them are not trying to rule the world. They're not trying to make this place, they're not trying to bring you a $75 Frankensteak. They're trying to make food more accessible. They're trying to make things better and easier for you to get, but there's a lot of bad spinning going on. Now, do I promote Monsanto? Absolutely not. Do I think that they do horrible things? I absolutely do. But do I think they do have some beneficial things to them? Some of the research that they have put out has helped advance a lot of the things that we're doing right now as far as integrating technology into our fields. Not particularly talking about Roundup and stuff, but talking about bringing technological advances to help us grow. One of the most important things that we've seen and that has been very detrimental to our agriculture is monocropping. We're looking at producing one crop on a field constantly. Well, this is a major problem when you have to constantly dump nutrients in and you have to constantly pour pesticides on because there's no integration. There's no diversity of plant life to fend off certain things and fend off other things. So like all of us, some of us are slightly more immune to the flu than other people's. Some people might be better off to food poisoning than other folks. Again, plants are exactly the same way. Plants respond exactly the same way. When you get powdery mildew, you may see 6 out of the 8 plants in your room are devastated. But those 2 plants that aren't have a genetic advantage over those other ones. So when we get a better understanding of our genetics and we get a better understanding of what's happening and we introduce more money into the science, we're gonna have a better knowledge of how to take care of our plants organically. We're gonna have a better knowledge of what it takes to make the best plants grow indoors and outdoors organically. I really do think that the two communities are butting heads, and they shouldn't be. They should be shaking hands and working together to bring each other information, to help each other grow, and help each other profit, because that's what agriculture needs. We cannot have farmers relying on subsidies to make their make themselves passionate about what they're doing. They need to be able to be paid like everybody else. We need to have jobs back in America where we have people who are legitimate citizens who are working on our farms and who are making an income. But again, this is something that we need to do ourselves through science and technology and interacting with your government. If you don't speak with your government, they will not know you exist. This is a democracy for a reason. Get involved in it. It is super important. So the cost of production is way larger than what you want to hear, okay? Inputs are horrendous. I mean, we're looking at, on a flowering period, the lights are only on for 12 hours a day. And you're gonna spend probably 10 hours in there making sure everything's right. You're gonna become extremely anal about everything. If one thing I can tell you that is super important, I think I told you before, very important, that plants are like people, this is number 2, cleanliness. Keep everything as clean as you possibly can. Be a nerd about it, be OCD about it. It is super important to make sure it is clean in your room, because if you have a dirty room, it invites pests, it invites problems, and it invites more money being dumped into your production system than you want to. The number one thing we're looking for in production is sustainability. Not just sustainability for the environment, but sustainability economically for our growers. If we can't pay for our crops to grow, we cannot consume them. So sustainability has twofold parts. We need to be able to make sure that we can produce our crop next season, and we need to make sure that that crop can grow in the soil that we've desired to grow in. So we have to, again, play hand in hand together. And this is just something that the scientific community has been working on for a very, very, very long time. As we begin to watch these large corporations get excited about all this, this is something that we're gonna see. We're gonna see money beginning to get dumped in. I've been working for probably 7 or 8 years on activism, on making sure that people are educated on this. One of the reasons I'm here today is because of Steve D'Angelo. I started the Students for Sensible Drug Policy chapter at Washington State University in 2007. And after I did that, Students for Sensible Drug Policy was brought down to San Francisco. And Steve was able to take us through Harborside facility and show us the ins and outs of everything, everything. He took us to the back safe, areas where nobody was ever allowed, and we're college students and high school students. He was educating the future of America, and now I'm standing next to him delivering a speech 6 years later, which is awesome. And it's events like this where people who would never connect to each other are connecting. People who have 2 totally ancillary businesses that have nothing to do with each other are now grouped under one house. We are a community that needs to be working together. We are a community that needs to be showing everybody else that we're not just a bunch of stoner potheads, that we're intelligent, we're articulate. We are the upper echelon of who we are and what we're doing. It is extremely important. Image is everything. To steal from a Canon camera ad in the 1990s with Andre Agassi, image is everything. And when you speak to your representative, they do not want to see somebody who they're uncomfortable with. If you're going to go speak to them, have bullet points where you can directly address really quickly. We're talking about people who are running our country. Okay? They don't have time to just dilly-dally and chat about your daily things. Get in there, nail your points down, educate them on the most beneficial ways you can on what you're talking about. Because when they get a better understanding of what you're talking about, they'll get a better understanding of how to write the legislation. And another thing is, every single person in this room can write legislation. Nothing is stopping any one of you from writing legislation at all. You write it up. Deliver it to your senator and your representative. They'll probably amend it. Most likely, they'll tell you, thank you very much, and you'll never see anything of it. You may even see parts of what you wrote in another legislation. The most important thing is you interacted in a democracy. You were democratic. You are American. That is the most important thing in this community. Making sure people know what you want and how you're going to get there. Thank you very much.